Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, ever thought about going on a retreat?
Well, actually, believe it or not, later this month, I'm actually going on the 27th of this month. We're actually taking our trustee board away for a day out. Now, I'm now thinking, oh boy, we've made a mistake. What we should be doing is going on a retreat. And the world's greatest expert on retreats is actually with us on the podcast today. Her name is Hilary Rowland. Welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much indeed. And yes, you have made a mistake.
It was a collective one, and I'll make sure that the board listens to this. However, all I can say is this is a fascinating topic, because I'm sure many of us who have been in corporate have all cleared off and gone on these, well, jollies really, and you're talking a little bit of strategy, having a few drinks, trying to get to know and like each other. It probably all falls apart. And there's probably a facilitator there, somebody well-meaning, a bit like Kevin, it's nice person. But at the end of the day, you probably go back and you still hate all the rest of the board anyway. Is that how it is?
Not at all, no. In fact, I don't know whether you've seen any of my LinkedIn posts recently, but I've just put one up saying, are you contemplating a strategy away day? Don't.
Yes, I did see that.
Because my experience of them is that they're really hard work. They're full of one PowerPoint presentation after the next. Oh, yeah. And then there's somebody trying to herd everybody in the same direction. And at the end of the day, an action plan is produced, which nobody ever looks at again. So I can't really see the point.
Well, what do you think drives people to do to go away anyway? What is it that they're missing that they think that they need to go away to resolve?
Well, I think going away is a very good idea because, as we all know, it's very easy to get nose to the grindstone and never lift our head above the parapet. And we all need to step back and think about what's going on in the business, what's going on in our lives, what's going on in our families to be able to take the right action. But it's very hard to do that when you are working really hard and under pressure.
You say families, but you don't. Sorry, Ken, but you say families, but you don't go away on a normal executive away day, and you start talking about your families unless it's an aside.
No, we certainly wouldn't handle it directly. But at the end of the day, if people have got lifestyles, work styles that impact on their family, it is something they've got to think about.
That's a very valid point, because you can't, in my experience, separate work and person very easily. And
no, you can't.
Certainly, I've worked for an organisation that had me involved in being away from home probably 4 or 5 days a week. And that has a huge impact on family, on lifestyle, and so on. So, yeah, you cannot separate them.
Absolutely. And I think what we encourage people to do is take a much broader view of their lives, what's working, what isn't working, because that will enable them to be more effective at work.
So, okay, there was a time when you didn't think this way, wasn't there? Because effectively there was a moment in your life where you said, this is just damn silly. Why are we doing these things in this way? I'm sure there is a better way to do it. What was that time and what brought you to this sort of revelation?
Well, there was a moment. It wasn't quite as you described, but we started off, and I say we because I work with my business partner, Peter Hyson. We were originally with the Academy for Chief Executives, running small groups for CEOs of SMEs. Mm-hmm. And part of the package was a 2-day annual retreat. And when I started off, the person who was training me said, you take them away Sunday night, Monday morning, give them a speaker, something to think about. And then in the afternoon, you tell them that they've got free time. It's time to think, time to plan for the next year. And they mustn't look at their emails or their phone, do any phone calls. But they must just use the time to think. They can go for a walk, they can have a sauna, whatever they want to do. And I thought, really? I've got some really busy CEOs here. They're going to be screaming if I tell them that. But they didn't. They absolutely loved it. And of course, because we ran these groups over a period of years, we did retreats with them over time. And every time we thought we need to put a bit more value into the afternoon, just, a bit more stuff. They hated it. They really resented it because they knew that they were going to have that time to think. And it was, how often do you get given permission just to take some time to think in business? And that's what they really valued. And they would tell the new people joining the group, listen, mate, you mustn't miss this. This is the highlight of the year. And so we thought, we've got something really special here. Why not, open it up to a much wider audience, not just people who are in small peer learning groups?
So if I follow you right, sorry, I want to go back again to this moment when you effectively discovered this idea of retreats. It wasn't your original business then. You kind of joined Peter then. Is that how it worked?
Well, I joined the academy first and then Peter came in after.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't my original business, no. The Next Chapter Retreats, we started June 2019, coming, and we were doing both things at the same time at that point.
But previous to this, you were chair of Vistage, which many people listening might well have heard of. It's sort of almost like an upmarket, I'm going to say a networking group, but it's showing my lack of knowledge of Vistage. But tell us a bit more about Vistage.
The Academy for Chief Executives was actually bought by Vistage. So I was doing that first and then became a Vistage chair. They run peer learning groups for CEOs of SMEs all over the world. And basically what people get is 1 day a month with a speaker and then the opportunity to discuss any business issues with each other and learn from each other, coaching, and this 2-day annual retreat.
I've got to say, Kevin, and I'm sure is bursting to tell you that he's involved in a group called Grow CFO.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Which sounds a bit similar.
It's not, well, potentially, yes.
Similar, but different in a way. We're trying to help folk who are senior members of the finance team make that next step up to the C-suite. And then folk that have arrived in the C-suite get to grips with that new job, because the change from being head of finance to being CFO is, we think, quite massive.
Absolutely.
We're mostly into online networking, online training, mentoring, but all happening in an online or virtual environment. None of it happening face to face the way you're doing it. So that's the key difference here.
Yes.
And you started running your retreats in the middle of 2019. Now that sounds like classically good timing, given we then went into lockdown.
Yes. We managed to run one retreat, and then along came the pandemic. And like everybody else, the big word of the time was pivot. So we tried to pivot online, and then just realized, in terms of what we offer people, which is taking them away to a really nice hotel, great environment, it's really relaxed, giving them space and time, you're going to think that doesn't translate to a webinar, with kids running in and out and the cat walking across the keyboard. So we thought we're not going to try. We'll hang loose, hang tight really, and wait till the hotels open. And in June this year, we had our first post-lockdown retreat, which was massively successful, beyond our expectations. So we thought, great, we've got a product. We know it delivers real value, benefit to people. The rest is marketing. Easier said than done.
The idea, if I may break it down, you've got senior leaders of relatively small, medium enterprise size businesses. So they're all effectively chief executives. They run their own companies.
Yes.
And you bring them together in a very convivial sort of arrangement, a nice hotel, etc. You structure their time so they feel, I don't know, appreciated, relaxed, but also stimulated. So there's a balance there. And then, but the key thing is, I'm with Kevin, and I'm also with various other people that they're peers, as I think you mentioned the word peer. They're learning from people who are not necessarily in their industry, but they're learning from people in the same broad position that they're in.
Indeed.
And then isn't that the secret sauce?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Peter and I are both experienced executive coaches, and we've become convinced in our work with Vistage that actually working with people in small groups is much more powerful than working one-to-one, because people learn from each other, they get ideas from each other, they challenge each other, and you just need one person in the group to start opening up about what their issues are, and the rest will follow suit.
Yeah.
And they'll measure themselves against each other in a very helpful kind of way.
There's always that one person, and I tend to be it, that asks the damn fool question, but it's in my mind and it comes rushing out. But there's probably 5 or 6 other people in the room who are thinking, thank God he's asked it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then it triggers the conversation that goes on.
Exactly.
And Kevin's there sniggering in the background. I know you feel it over the shoulder somewhere. He's there.
Yeah, there's Arrowsmith making a fool of himself again. Didn't he know that?
No, it is true. But I think we've probably all got some sense of being in that sort of situation, although they're not. And this is the difference. This is the bit that I want to draw out, Hilary, is that what's different about your retreats from an away day? Because if an away day has a certain looseness to it, is there a big difference between that and what you're doing?
Well, our flagship product is a 5-day retreat over 3 months. Okay. So that's different to start. I mean, we have also got a 2-day retreat, but the whole idea is to give people as much time as they need. We do have structured activities, and which are very much about getting to people to reflect, us asking questions about things that maybe they haven't thought about for a long time, maybe to look at areas of their lives that they've shut in a trunk and don't want to look at, although we never force people to talk about anything they don't want to. But for all of that, you need time. And that's why the first part takes 3 days. We use the Japanese concept of ikigai to help people connect or reconnect with their purpose. So we get them to look at what they're good at, what they love, and what really matters to them. And also the things that in their lives that haven't gone quite so well. And all of that comes together in the first 3 days. And then because that process kicks off a whole lot of things in terms of people opening up new options, people need to go back and talk to their partner, people start wanting to grow new mindsets, new approaches. We support that over 3 months with 3 webinars. So they know they've got somebody to come back to ask questions, but they're also accountable. And then in the last 2 days, they come back for action planning for where they want to be in 5 years' time.
So these are not people at the end of their careers necessarily. These people are relatively new to their roles?
Well, if I take the people who came on our last retreat, they included a partner in an accountancy firm who wanted to change careers, an MD of a media company that wanted to take her leadership to the next level, someone who in her early 60s was thinking about the last few years of her career and into retirement, and then somebody else who had been an MD whose lifestyle was absolutely killing them, and they knew they had to do something.
Wow. So quite different personalities.
Yes.
Is it more of a female thing than a male thing?
It very much depends. Our Vistage group was nearly all men. We found it really hard to recruit women. This one happened to be 1 man and 3 women, but I think it's just the luck of the draw. We don't find a particular difference in terms of people expressing an interest.
Must have been hell on earth for that man, though.
Well, I don't know. I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, it probably could. But no, we'll keep on the straight and narrow on that one. But I do like the idea that you're reconnecting people with their purpose, because it presupposes you know what that purpose is in the first place.
Well, if they don't, they will by the end of the 3 days.
Yeah, and purpose is a subject I've thought a lot about. We've had previous guests on the podcast that have talked to us about purpose.
Yeah.
Do you find that most people do know that purpose, or there's an exercise to go through to think about it?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I think for some people it doesn't even matter. You know, having a purpose doesn't really matter one way or the other. They're kind of happy with their lives and happy to jog on. I think increasingly, and I think we probably see it in the millennial generation, that people are saying, actually, I want my life to amount to something. Mm. Or even, you know, at the end of a career saying, I want to leave a legacy. You know, I want this all to add up. I want it to be significant. And I think that's when they start asking the questions about purpose.
Yeah.
Well, it does sound a little bit like some people in our society want to be on TV or want to be influencers or whatever. And it's almost like it's not immune to the business population. I want to leave a legacy. Just get your job done.
Yes. And if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But, you know, I guess sometimes the legacy is about doing something, you know, people get to the end of their working lives with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. Yeah. And I hate it when people just say, oh, you know, well, I'm just going to retire now. Because I just think, well, what are you going to do with all that stuff? And, you know, maybe they could do some voluntary work or charity work or you know, start a business, you know, anything, but use what you've got.
I love that passion in your voice. And I think recent podcast with Sue Richardson talked about, and we've had other people as well talking about publishing books and so forth.
Funnily enough, I've just listened to her webinar this morning.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. But another really passionate person. I think we both loved her. I think she was fantastic because the whole idea is, just as you're saying, Hilary, people have got to a certain age, or you've built up so much knowledge. What on earth are you going to do with it, and how are you going to structure the release of that knowledge or the passing on of that knowledge?
Yes.
Is this part and parcel of what your retreat's about?
For somebody at that stage of their life, absolutely. But right. People come to us with all kinds of motivations, as you've picked up in the terms of people I've described. You know, they come with a relationship breakdown, a bereavement, a medical diagnosis, which makes them think, you know, I've got to do something with my life, redundancy, you know, all kinds of motivations, or just a feeling that actually their life just isn't what they wanted it to be. Maybe it's a midlife crisis, you know, all kinds of stages of feeling just dissatisfied. I need something different. I need to write another chapter of my life.
The specifics, so I won't get into too much specifics of the charity that I'm a trustee of, but basically we manage a town hall, and basically at the end of the day, we're going away to try and figure out because I think we've been thrown, just like many other people have, a curveball by the Chinese, unfortunately. But effectively, we've had to battle the pandemic, and that's meant that income's been affected and so forth, and is likely to be for another year or so. But so what do we do? And we having board meetings, etc., is one thing, but I think the reason that we wanted to get away was because we just don't have enough collective time to discuss some of these important things. And I think that's probably the reason that we got to the point where we said, right, let's get away. Yeah. But I think the first thing, we're going to Bolton Abbey, which is close to where we are in West Yorkshire. Lovely place. And effectively, the first part of that is just to go away, go for a walk. Now, in effect, I hope it's not a long walk because it's going to be dark and miserable and bloody raining, no doubt. But the thing about it is that we will get together and we will have that opportunity to talk about the things we're going to do. But like you were saying right at the beginning, Hilary, in a nice way, you were saying, don't do it. What's the alternative for groups like ours?
Oh, I think getting together is absolutely crucial, especially at the moment, because I'm working with teams in company where they haven't seen each other for months. They've been working from home, working all hours, trying to keep the whole thing going, only ever talking to each other on a screen.
Yes,
and an awful lot has been lost in that. And a lot of them are burnt out, and actually find it really hard to admit it because it's happened so slowly that they haven't noticed they've got to that stage. And the company culture, it has started to be destroyed because they haven't been there keeping it going. And so I think it's absolutely vital that teams get back together again. And I think retreats are a great way to reconnect, because I think they're just, they just offer, I think, just a bit more space and time, less structured, less pressurized. We don't believe in filling every moment of the day. So it just gives people time to go for that walk. I think it's absolutely vital, and start connecting with themselves, with each other in a different way.
I love that idea, Kevin. I mean, we talked about that on another podcast, our 300th podcast. We talked about the idea of being distant and virtual. I've got to say, my general view about that is don't like it. Your general view is that, well, it's worked for us.
Yeah.
But Hilary, I think you're in the no get together camp, aren't you?
Well, I mean, lots of people are wanting hybrid working at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. If that's what works for the company, but it's if the senior management team aren't connected, how on earth are they going to connect the rest of the company? How are they going to motivate people, keep people on board? We've heard about the Great Resignation. Well, it's not surprising. If people don't feel connected, they don't feel valued. And I think very often, a managing director or CEO who invests time and money in, taking their senior management team away, it's a great investment, because those people really appreciate it and get an awful lot out of it. And you're less likely to lose those people.
I think that's very true. And I'm reflecting in my own mind at the moment about that idea of making sure the space in that retreat, because my experience is we're going to have an away day. You'll find a couple of junior members of staff who are very good at admin and organizing stuff, and you'll give them a project to go, now arrange the away day.
Yes.
And they will automatically get into the mindset, there's got to be something interesting, exciting going on every minute of every day. And it gets packed with stuff very, very rapidly.
Yes.
Now, I can flip that around and say, well, we're going to the board, we're going away for a strategy away day. And there's certain things that you might want to do, get the team offsite and go through a very structured process to put the strategy together. And I can see that. But if it's just an away day that you're filling with stuff that's about team building, reinvigorating and so on, I really, really do see that advantage in the use of free time and space.
Well, yeah. I mean, the team retreats I've done are usually 2 days, and it's very similar to the structure that we used when with Vistage. So do something in the first morning, often give people some content, some input. Afternoon is free, and then the next day is really spent starting to look at the business issues, and we get them to present their goals for the year, and in that process they start talking to each other about the issues that need to be dealt with, because they've got to work together. One person is finding this issue, somebody else is finding the same issue, and it surfaces. It comes to the surface, and because you've set the environment of a relaxed, reasonably confidential space where people can talk together, and they've spent some time connecting, they've had great conversations about what the real business issues are.
Yeah. And I'm thinking into not just bringing CEOs together of all different organizations, but bringing folk together maybe on that strategy event or from the same company.
Yes.
And one of the big issues that we've certainly identified with the CFO community is that those folk get so busy, so involved in the day-to-day of the business, the vast number of different tasks they've got to cope with, that a common problem is just lack of thinking time.
Exactly.
And quite often, I think we expect folk to just turn up for the strategy away day and already have done the thinking. the pre-thinking before going in there and have some idea what's going on. Where the reality is probably that, no, they haven't. They were working until 7 or 8 o'clock the night before to try and make space to have 2 days out the office, and they've not done a single bit of thinking. They've just rolled up on the morning of the event.
And guess what? While they're all sitting there waiting for the event to start, they're all doing their emails. Mm-hmm. At every coffee break, they rush off to do phone calls. Yep. So you haven't got their attention at all.
Is there a more draconian version? As in, let's go back to the 70s. You don't have a mobile phone. Or choose a hotel in out the Hebrides or somewhere that just doesn't have any internet connection.
Yes.
Is there some kind of that type of arrangement where people really have to sort of deconstruct their normal lives and then they're thrust into an area that is, yes, you might still have the input, but you're going to be listening a little bit more intently, maybe. And then when you're going to relax, you're going to be relaxing a little bit, well, a lot more, because otherwise you'd be walking around the grounds with your mobile stuck to your ear. And I think that's the problem that you've got with always on businesses, yes. Isn't it? So how are you starting to think that way, or maybe not?
Well, interestingly, we say up front before people come on the retreat that we discourage emails and phone calls. And actually, it's just part of the contract that we have with people. So it's about confidentiality. It's about the phones and the emails, and actually, people are delighted and relieved to not to have to be looking at their emails. And I think if the person who sent them on the team retreat, or the person who's there with them, the MD or the CEO, understands that and reinforces it, then it works really well. I did one recently, which was a Thursday, Friday, and they decided they weren't going to look at their emails till Monday, and they loved it. Mm. So I think it's possible. I think once you explain to people why and they see the value of it, they do it actually.
Yeah, we've had we've had a recent guest as well who actually her episode's got to come up yet. So basically she'll talk about turning off notifications, not dealing with emails, yes. First thing in the morning, and all the rest of that. And there's lots of great advice in that podcast, but the essence of it is, for goodness sake, and I paraphrase because I did live through the 70s, like actually all three of us, but basically the whole idea of that was that you just didn't have these phones, or you yes. did. There's red things and boxes and on the road and stuff like that, yes. on your desk. But the point,
we could go back to the 70s, Graham. You had the 3-day week, leaves 2 days for the retreat.
Yeah, I'm amazed that we have lights on with
yes.
But seriously, I do think that the idea of a retreat is a really, I mean, my mother used to go to a Christian retreat up in the Dales near Kettlewell, and that took her away from yes. the stresses and strains that she was feeling.
Yes.
I perhaps didn't appreciate it at the time, but it did her an awful lot of good yes. at the time. And many people probably still observe that. Is there some roots in religious retreats that sort of got you into the business side of it as well?
To some extent. Yeah, I think Peter and I have both experienced religious retreats. I think that how we see these is that they can be, depending on where people want to go, deeply spiritual, actually. Mm. I think the whole idea of purpose is spiritual. Yeah. But we don't use that word very much because people immediately associate it with religion, and then they get a bit antsy. But yes, I mean, I myself had a retreat earlier this year because I go with a group of people to the Scottish island of Iona.
Oh yeah.
Regularly, which is a deeply spiritual place.
It is. Yeah.
And I couldn't wait because by that stage I was burnt out and I needed that time and space for myself. So I was practicing what I preach. So I think there's it can be spiritual. It's what people want. We don't force anything on anybody. We don't force an ideology, a theory, anything on people. We just give them a framework and let them do what they want with it.
At the end of the retreat, presumably you have some mechanism to sort of gather people's before and after feelings, almost. So and when they're walking out the door and heading to the exit, what are they saying about their transformation, whether that's within a day or within a couple of days? What are they saying?
We've got a whole lot of testimonials that people have said. I think people's eyes have been opened to potential they didn't realize they had.
Right.
And people are now thinking much, much bigger about their lives and what they would like to do with their lives than they were. But we had the most incredible feedback on our recent retreat. I've never had such amazing feedback. People were just wandering around saying, "This is awesome." I mean, it was just, it was incredible. And I mean, I've described to you who was there. They're not kids.
No. But you might tap down into their inner child within them that this sort of comes out, that they're willing to be open, much more open, just like we were as kids. I mean,
yes,
we weren't as structured, we weren't as compressed. Exactly. And what a wonderful time it was. And I would like to see kids feeling that way. But I'm just looking at your website, and one of the things that you talk about is having drinks there together, particularly if you've got an overnight, and then as you described it, supper, which I suppose is just a posh way of saying dinner, I suppose. But
yes.
That's supper, Graham. That's something you have at your grandma's house in your dressing gown and slippers around about the time the Saturday night the match of the day comes on.
It's the late night snack, isn't it?
A hot cup of cocoa.
Yeah. But that said, I understand. But you, that social side of the retreat, how important is that?
Oh, hugely. So a lot of people associate retreats with detoxing or wellness or yoga. I think we're at the retoxing end of the spectrum. So good food, red wine, and being able to sit down over a drink, and it's a really important part of the whole day, because we do things with people in the morning, afternoon, and then give them quite a lot of free time. And we need to bring people back together again to talk about what's been going on, and just to allow them to check in if they want to. So, but just to have fun as well. I mean, we play games, we do all kinds of things.
You're going to have to tell us what games you play, at least one of them anyway. Give us an idea.
2 truths, 1 lie.
Oh, my. 2 truths, 1 lie. So it's somebody's you basically all right, so you have to decide which is the lie then.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fair enough. I have to say, you're a bit of a breath of fresh air, because you're not coming and preaching BS. This is stuff that can really help people transit from being really uptight, stressed, the whole thing.
Absolutely.
They go on the retreat, and the retreat is different from an away day. But is everybody, I mean, I'm going back to my own board now of the trustees. There's currently, unfortunately, we've just had a lady resign, and she resigned because, she's just passed away. She basically had a tumor, so that didn't have much long, and very a wonderful woman. But the point is, we're now down to 8, so 8 people going away, and it's I think it's 50-50 in terms of gender. So basically, what we'll have, I think, a great day with a couple of other people as well. We have a chief exec and somebody else, and effectively what we'll try and do is we will try and, I suppose, structure some form of way forward. Would you, given that we're not going to do a retreat because it's only 2 weeks away, what would you recommend to build into such a day that might help us get the best out of the day?
What I would recommend is an exercise that I do quite often with groups, is to get them in pairs to talk about 3 occasions in the company when they were performing at their best. So things were going really well, they're being really successful, and they talk to each other about this. And then the question I ask is, what does that tell you about your strengths? And then the second question is, what conditions enable you to be successful? So it getting people to think positively about what they've done gets them into the right state of frame of mind. But also the question about what conditions gets at what's in the company already that supports people.
Right.
Because one of the big things about strategy away days is people say, especially with an outside consultant, well, you're just trying to get us to look through rose-tinted spectacles, aren't you? But actually, what you say to them is, you told me about real situations when you're being successful. You told me about the conditions. That's there. That's in the company. Mm. How can we build on that? And if it's got a bit lost during the pandemic, how can we build that back up again? And that's a great way of opening the day and just kind of setting the scene and just getting people into the right frame of mind. Because, it's very easy. And I think we're all kind of socialized into, looking at problems, finding the deficits and then fixing them. But you only get people up to a baseline at that point. Whereas if you start with success and say, how can we build on that? You go so much further.
Wow.
I like that, Hilary. I really like that.
20,000 quid worth of a consultancy that came
Indeed.
It is. Compare that with the consultancy we got from Felix Verardi when he was talking about doubling your business in 3 years and building strategy to do that a few weeks ago.
Honestly,
together, I think we've got pure gold there, Graham. We
are blessed with the guests that we get coming on to the show, and it is very necessarily a kind of a Catholic sort of type show in a sense. We have a broad range of topics that we cover. But the beauty of yourself is that everybody can visualize what this is. Nice hotel, peers, not necessarily your colleagues, could be, but basically you're going to go away and I love the idea of retoxing, but you might have a bit of a detox and retox. Love that idea. In other words, be human with each other. You've got nothing to impress on anyone. Nobody cares that you're CEO. So am I. At the end of the day, what a wonderful idea. It must mean that you're going to be successful.
Well, the really interesting thing that we also observed with our Vistage groups is that what the CEOs really value is they develop a really deep emotional connection to each other. Now, if you said to any CEO, "Oh, would you like to join a group and develop a really deep emotional connection to, 6 or 7 other blokes?" Oh, no. But once they've done it, they really value it because they don't get it anywhere else.
Yeah. It's very true. Within the C-suite, and we know from Grow CFO, it's very, very difficult to get people voluntarily starting to chat to each other.
Yes.
Trying to get communities together, trying to get forum discussion together.
Yes.
You're constantly pushing a great big boulder uphill. But once folk get past that initial barrier and actually get to know each other, once you've put them into small peer groups to do something, those groups really do stick.
They do. They really, really do. Yeah. All of this takes a little bit longer than people normally take. As you've said, normally it's a strategy away day, not days. It takes a little bit longer, but it pays dividends.
Yeah. So, Hilary, if say I was coming along to you and saying I want to do a 2-day away day, a 2-day retreat rather, what sort of cost am I looking at?
For our open programs, a 2-day retreat is £1,860 plus VAT. For a 2-day retreat. The 5-day retreats are £4,560 plus VAT, and both of those are inclusive. So accommodation, food, the webinars, and so on.
That doesn't sound out of.
It's not a huge amount of money, and I'm thinking about Grow CFO and what we charge for mentoring and things like that, and throw in that. In fact, this isn't a 2-hour mentoring call. This is a 2 days away. This is at a very nice venue. This is decent speaker being pulled in as well. I don't think that's an unreasonable cost for the amount of value that's on offer.
I have a question about, you mentioned right at the beginning, Hilary, that this idea that you kind of load them up on the first morning with a bit of content. How do you pick and what is that content, given that people might necessarily not be from the same business? same position in relative to that content. What is that content? How does it benefit?
Well, it depends. If it's an internal in-company retreat, I have a conversation with them, find out kind of what they'd like, and so I may deliver that myself. Okay. For our 2-day retreat, we're bringing in somebody who's an expert in neuropsychology to talk about how do you use yourself, your time, and your energy effectively. So he's going to be delivering content on that.
Wow. Just it reminds me of the was it Faulty Towers episode where Basil's faced up. There's a psychologist, or is it? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but one of them turned up at Basil's Faulty Towers, and he's freaked by it.
Yes, I remember that.
A neuroscientist is going to turn up. I think I'd be thinking, he's going to get right under my skin.
Well, not at all. I mean, he talks about things like, the whole 80-20 principle. Yes. Yeah. So what are the 20% of what you do that produces the 80% of your results? At what part of the day are you at your best? So make sure that, when you're at your best and you've got your most energy, you do your 20%. It's tips and hints and tips like that.
Got you. Oh, wow. That's another $5,000 worth of consultancy there, isn't it? Yeah, I mean,
that's an interesting thing. I really like the idea of that sort of speaker.
Me too. Actually.
I'm thinking of a couple of events that I've done in the past, and the organisation I joined after PwC Hydra. I remember we had an away day there, and the theme of the away day was, how do we make the boat go faster?
Yes.
And the keynote, we had the British Olympic rowing team in. I think it was the crew from the men's 8 boat.
Yeah.
Also remember I worked for a while with in the early stages of putting together London 2012 Olympics, and I remember an away day, and the keynote came from Chris Akabusi.
Oh yes,
it was absolutely brilliant and hilarious, yes. And I'd have any time, but none of it was kind of on that more thinking about how your brain works, how you interact with other people, and so on, that you just described with the more scientific speaker.
Well,
I really see that the advantage of doing that sort of thing rather than get the big name in.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I mean, obviously I was on a different track, but when I was at Lego, we had Jim Bowen. So he was just talking about, this is what you could have had. Do you not remember the show Bullseye? But could that guy make you laugh? I was in tears laughing at the guy. But having said that,
that was the same with our experience with Chris Akabusi. He's absolutely hilarious as well.
I'm sure he is. But
and it depends what you want in terms of what effect do you want to what you want to get from the event, really.
I absolutely, and I have to say, I thought we'd learn an awful lot from you today, Hilary, but we really have. You've been an absolutely outstanding guest today on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much indeed.
Well, Graham, that's certainly given me a different view of what an away day should be.
Yeah, me too. And that question, I'll go through the show notes and make sure that question is passed on to my fellow trustees on the charity that I work for. So basically, it was a great podcast. Hilary's so talented, no question about that. And I really do like the idea of structuring these, as she calls them, next chapter retreats. And you can actually find out more about Hilary's business at thenextchapter.guru.
Yeah, but I'd say with the Next 100 Days podcast, if you've got a message there that you somehow need to find yourself more thinking time, well, you don't necessarily have to go on a retreat. Okay, Hilary can find you the nice venue, the space, and all the rest of it. But I really do believe there is huge value in somehow making some thinking space for yourself. And we've got so much feedback from Grow CFO, for example. So many people that are running businesses are telling us they're so consumed in the day-to-day that getting the actual thinking time that's necessary to take the business forward, to determine what the next plans are, to determine what the next strategy should look like, they're just not getting that time. So take some time now and think about how in the next 100 days are you going to get yourself some thinking space.
Well, it's been another great podcast, this time with Hilary Rowland. And today, well, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.